Good afternoon, and welcome to the Software Engineering Institute's webinar series. My name is Shane McGraw, your moderator for today, and I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar. Our webinar series presentation today is Use of Architecture-Centric Engineering for Improving a Software System by Felix Bachmann. Felix is a senior member of the technical staff at the SEI, working in the Research, Technology, and Systems Solution Program. Felix is a co-author of the Attribute-Driven Design Method, a contributor to and instructor for the ATAM Evaluator Training, a co-author of Documenting Software Architecture's Views and Beyond, and leading research on architecture design expert. And now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Felix Bachmann. Felix, all yours.
Thank you, Shane. Yeah, thanks for that nice introduction. It's always nice to hear what other people tell about me. First of all, I wish you a wonderful good morning or a good afternoon or good evening, wherever you might be. Here in Pittsburgh, we have early afternoon now. And today, I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the architectural life cycle in development. If you follow the SEI webinar series, then you probably already heard a lot about the SEI architecture methods, the design, the evaluation, the documentation, etc. When we go and help customers to establish that those methods, we very often see the problem that we always are asked saying, yeah, we understand all those methods, no problem. But how do we get all of them in concert established in our organization to actually effectively solve a problem that we have? And that's the topic of today's webinar. I'm trying to show in that webinar how all those methods actually work in concert to solve a problem effectively. Now, of course, as you can imagine, for a webinar that is 1 hour, I barely can scratch the surface here. The intention here is to really give you an idea, an overview, how everything works together. If you want to have more details, please feel free to contact us here at the SEI. We'll be happy to talk to you about any detail. Now, if you followed those webinars, you're probably familiar with that, the graphic that I'm showing right now, which shows those two circles working with each other. And the purpose of those two circles is the left one, trying to understand the problem and trying to come up with a solution, while the right circle focus on make sure that the envisioned solution is actually implemented appropriately so that overall the problem is solved. Through that webinar, I will touch some of those activities that happen during those cycles. So the very first one will be to really start formulating what the problem actually is. We will then talk about creating a plan, and yes, I know, we are here at the SEI, so you think every time when the SEI guys come, they talk about the process and planning. And yes, I know there might be an argument for that is overkill, but let's talk about that in a little bit detail, what it really means here for actually solving a problem. We then will talk about the design, and for the design, I really want to focus on one of the steps inside the design which we consider to be probably one of the most important ones, and that is deciding on alternatives, coming up with the right solution. We will talk a little bit about documentation, and finally in that in the left circle, it is a circle, and so there is a verification step, which in all cases always means that when you do something, make sure you're sure that you have did the right thing. So there's always a challenging of the solution step in there, which we'll talk about. After that, we'll focus on the right side of the circle. The right side, again, as I said before, the purpose here is to ensure that the system will actually implement it in the envisioned way. So there is, again, some documentation step, provide sufficient detail. Then there comes that big throwing over the wall step, which we all know that if you do that, you will be in big trouble. Yeah, we know that. But how do we actually do that so we are not in trouble? And we'll talk about that in the active design review. Then, of course, comes the implementation part. But for this webinar here, I will not talk about the implementation piece here. I will skip over that. The whole issue with what's your development process, how do you implement, how you do test is here. But that will not be covered in this webinar. But we'll then talk about the feedback. So how would you make sure that whatever is implemented actually is a valid implementation from whatever was designed, and talk about that, how that all works. So that's the very brief overview. Let's get started.